Um, Imagine a missionary. Right now, just, fix that image in your mind.
Yeah, you are probably picturing a dusty, remote jungle village.
Right. Or maybe someone translating the Gospel of John by the flickering light of a kerosene lamp in a rural outpost.
Well, that is the classic historical picture we all have.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into a reality that completely shatters that mental image.
Because the absolute front lines of modern global missions do not look like a jungle anymore.
No, they really do not. They look like a bustling, air-conditioned university lecture hall in Dubai.
Or they look like a virtual English tutoring session, happening on a laptop in a suburban living room.
We are looking at global education today. And this is an industry approaching $10 trillion in annual expenditures.
That number is just staggering. $10 trillion.
Right. And right in the middle of that massive global marketplace, unprecedented doors are swinging wide open for the gospel. Welcome to Reform Thinking.
I am so glad we are getting into this today because that $10 trillion figure, it is almost impossible to wrap the human mind around.
It really is.
But it dictates the movement of millions of people globally every single year.
And the sheer scale of the education sector creates logistical pathways that, well, traditional mission boards could never afford to build themselves.
Oh, absolutely. There is a massive irony here, though, when you look at the geopolitical landscape.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you have these nations that fiercely lock their borders. Like, they will completely deny entry to anyone holding a religious visa.
Right, they are entirely closed to traditional missionaries.
Yeah. But at the exact same time, those specific nations are spending billions of dollars to recruit Western educators.
They are literally rolling out the red carpet for them.
Spot on. They provide housing, they offer competitive salaries, and they grant legal residency.
All for teachers, administrators, and, university professors.
But before we get into the sheer mechanics of how that works on a global scale today, we have to look at this through a theological lens.
I agree. The theology really sets the stage here.
Because this entire dynamic perfectly aligns with a historically reformed understanding of vocation.
Right. We often fall into this mental trap, where we divide the world into two distinct categories.
The sacred and the secular.
Yes. We assume the vocational pastor or the career missionary is doing the quote-unquote real, holy work.
While the high school math teacher or the software engineer is just punching a clock.
Yeah, just existing in the secular realm to pay the mortgage.
But if you read the Westminster Confession, that sacred-secular divide gets completely demolished.
It really does. Because every honest profession, when done unto the Lord, glorifies God.
Right. The act of teaching a student how to properly conjugate English verbs or how to balance a complex chemistry equation is a literal act of bringing order to God's creation.
It is a holy vocation.
And what we are seeing now is that this specific vocation of teaching is currently the single greatest key for unlocking closed borders.
That theological framing provides the perfect starting point. But to truly understand the mechanics of what is happening in the 21st century, we actually need to rewind the clock.
Yeah, we need to go all the way back to the 1st century.
Because the modern educator stepping onto a campus in Beijing or Riyadh is not inventing a new strategy.
Not at all. The Apostle Paul provides the absolute blueprint for integrating secular work with global witness.
When we analyze Paul's specific missionary strategies, we find 6 distinct professional advantages that he leveraged.
And every single one of them mirrors the reality of the modern global educator.
Let's break those down. What is the first advantage?
The first advantage is his strategic use of language. Paul's native heart language was likely Aramaic.
Right. But when he traveled, he utilized Greek to communicate with Gentiles throughout the entire Roman world.
Because Greek was the lingua franca of his day. It was the operating system of the Mediterranean.
You would hear it in political arenas, philosophical debates, and mundane transactions in the meat market.
So he leveraged the dominant language of commerce to communicate the gospel to the broadest possible audience.
He didn't just speak the, insular language of the local synagogue. He actually spoke the language of the international trade routes.
That makes perfect sense. And that brings us to the second advantage in his blueprint.
Which is his highly portable, globally demanded, marketplace job.
Well, we see in Acts chapter 18 that he was a tent maker. He worked with leather and canvas,
And that specific artisanal skill was required wherever armies marched.
or wherever merchants traveled and wherever people lived, really.
So it allowed him to secure immediate employment. He wasn't permanently tethered to a single static location.
Which leads directly into his third advantage. Paul functioned as an independent contractor.
Right, he funded his own ministry.
Yeah, by paying for his own food, his supplies, and his rented quarters, which we see explicitly at the end of Acts chapter 28.
So he retained total operational freedom.
Spot on. He was not waiting for a financial stipend from the church in Antioch to dictate his next move.
This self-funding mechanism gave him the flexibility to teach disciples and evangelize in the public squares on his own preferred schedule.
I want to offer an analogy here because this drastically changes how we view Paul.
Oh, go for it. What is the analogy?
When we look at him stitching canvas to fund his travels, he is essentially operating like an ancient gig economy worker.
Oh, that is a really good way to put it.
Right. Think of a modern freelance software developer or like an Upwork consultant.
Yeah, they can open their laptop in a coffee shop in Tokyo or a co-working space in Berlin.
They knock out their client deliverables to pay the rent.
And then they spend the rest of their week entirely engaged with the local culture.
Yeah, Paul wasn't tied down by a rigid 9-to-5 corporate structure that dictated his every waking hour.
His hands paid his rent, but his schedule belonged entirely to the mission.
He could work his leather in the early morning and then go debate Stoic philosophers in the Areopagus in the afternoon.
The gig economy analogy captures his operational freedom perfectly, and it connects directly to his fourth advantage.
Which was what?
His trade was culturally acceptable. Tent making was practical, understood, and valued by society.
It raised zero suspicion from local magistrates or Roman governors.
Rome was notoriously paranoid about secret societies and political subversives.
Yeah, they were. But nobody looked at a man quietly repairing canvas awnings and assumed he was a threat to the social order.
His job was a legitimate, undisputed contribution to the local economy.
Which brings us to his fifth advantage, his ability to travel widely using state-funded infrastructure.
The Roman Empire maintained an unprecedented network of international thoroughfares.
They cleared the seas of pirates and paved roads across continents.
And Paul utilized these Roman roads to journey across Israel, Arabia, Asia Minor, and Europe,
establishing churches across a massive geographical footprint.
Finally, we have his sixth advantage, which was his Roman citizenship.
This legal status granted him access, prestige, and preferential treatment.
It allowed him to navigate complex legal systems and avoid certain punishments.
And to cross borders, that would have been absolutely closed to a standard provincial subject.
Let's connect this directly to the Reformed perspective on providence.
Oh, this is a brilliant connection.
We believe God sovereignly orchestrates the geopolitical movements of human history for the sake of his elect.
Right. God didn't just passively watch the Roman Empire build its road system.
And he didn't just casually observe the Greeks spreading their language after the conquest of Alexander the Great.
No, God actively oversaw the construction of that physical Roman infrastructure.
And the dissemination of the Greek language, specifically to facilitate the rapid, explosive spread of the Christian church in the first century.
And what becomes incredibly clear is that God is doing the exact same thing right now with the infrastructure of globalization and the English language.
The parallels are undeniable. The modern education sector perfectly mirrors Paul's six advantages.
Today, the global use of English is far more pervasive than Greek ever was in the ancient world.
And education itself is a borderless international business.
Modern educators are highly mobile, moving effortlessly between massive global financial hubs and smaller provincial cities.
Just like Paul, an overseas educator can be entirely self-sufficient, funding their own ministry efforts through a very comfortable secular salary.
Furthermore, the role of a teacher is universally respected by citizens and governments alike.
It provides immediate, unquestioned cultural acceptability. You are viewed as an asset to the community, not a foreign religious agitator.
And modern passports, combined with globalized commercial air transit, act as the new Roman roads and Roman citizenship.
They provide legal entry into restricted access nations where traditional vocational missionaries are legally barred from ever stepping foot.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and evaluate your own secular profession right now.
Yeah, look at the specific skills you have spent years acquiring. Are they portable?
Are they in demand across international borders?
We so often think our secular qualifications are just mechanisms for climbing the corporate ladder
Right.
or padding a retirement account.
But how might Providence be arranging your specific secular qualifications for kingdom expansion?
Whether that is an ESL certification, a master's degree in engineering, or a background in higher education administration.
God might have given you that specific skill set so you could use it as your own modern version of tent making.
If we recognize that we possess this modern tent-making capability, the logical next step is to figure out where the actual demand is located.
Right, where are the modern Macedonian calls coming from?
The data reveals 4 major global educational trends that are currently ripe for the harvest.
The first massive trend is international enrollment. Universities all over the world are actively recruiting across borders.
They are hiring faculty internationally and building cross-cultural research partnerships.
This creates a fascinating multi-layered dynamic for evangelism.
You have host country evangelism, where you reach the international students coming into your own native country.
You have second country evangelism, where you pack up and go to teach in a foreign nation.
And then you have this brilliant concept of third country evangelism.
This is where an educator from one nation meets a student from another nation in a completely different third country.
There is a phenomenal historical anecdote about this exact third country dynamic in the sources.
Oh, yes. The story about the student from Taiwan.
Right. So this student from Taiwan traveled to the United States to study for a PhD in electrical engineering.
And while he was grinding through this intense academic program at an American university, a local church with an international student outreach welcomed him in.
Through that hospitality, he and his wife heard the gospel and were converted.
After graduating with his doctorate, he could have easily gone back to Taiwan for a highly lucrative career in their tech sector.
Instead, he made a deliberate choice to become a professor at a university in Singapore.
Why did he do that?
Because that specific university in Singapore attracts massive numbers of students from mainland China.
He and his wife joined a Chinese-speaking church in Singapore and started a campus ministry specifically to disciple those mainland Chinese students.
It is a masterpiece of providence, really. God brought a Taiwanese man to America to save him.
Then he deployed him to Singapore, all to reach mainland Chinese students who are otherwise extremely difficult to access.
You are reaching multiple unreached people groups simultaneously, all converging in a single classroom.
That specific sequence of events perfectly illustrates the Reformed doctrine of the irresistible call.
God actively draws his elect from every corner of the globe.
He will literally orchestrate geopolitical movements, academic ambitions, and university enrollment algorithms.
All to ensure his people are in the exact right place at the right time to hear the gospel.
The second major trend facilitating this global movement is English education.
English has become the undisputed global language of science, technology, aviation, and commerce.
Prominent figures in language education note that English is the absolute required language for publishing in international academic journals.
Because of this economic and academic reality, nations are mandating English instruction at younger and younger ages.
We are seeing a massive rise in what the industry calls ESP, or English for specific purpose.
This is not just basic conversational English, right?
No, this is teaching medical English to nurses in Southeast Asia, or aviation English to pilots in the Middle East.
Or business English to executives in Latin America. Short-term, high-energy English camps during summer months are also exploding in popularity across Europe and Asia.
I am going to step in and play the skeptic for a second, because I know someone listening is probably feeling a bit uneasy about this.
Oh, sure. What is the pushback?
Isn't this aggressive push for Western English education just a repackaged form of cultural imperialism?
That is a very common question.
Doesn't this sound suspiciously like the 19th century British East India Company claiming they were providing a mutually beneficial service while actually just exporting Western dominance and erasing local cultures?
It is a valid historical concern, but the underlying mechanics of what is happening today are completely different from 19th century colonialism.
How so? The sources are pretty clear on this distinction.
Well, this is not a case of Westerners rolling in with military backing and forcing their language onto unwilling populations.
Right. The text clarifies that this is a response to genuine, eager, organically generated global demand.
The mandates for English instruction are being written by the educational ministries of the host countries themselves.
Developing nations recognize that English proficiency is the literal gatekeeper to participating in the modern global economy.
It is required for accessing cutting-edge scientific research and securing upward mobility for their citizens.
By providing English education, a Christian teacher is offering a legitimate, highly requested service.
They are fulfilling a contract that the host culture desperately wants fulfilled.
Okay, so the agency lies with the host country. They are the ones putting out the job postings because they want the economic benefits the language provides.
Exactly. Wait, spot on. It is a consensual, mutually beneficial exchange.
We provide the high-level education they are desperate for, and in doing so, we earn a legitimate place in their society to build relationships and live out the gospel.
So if English education is the second trend, where is the third area of growth?
The third trend is online education. This sector obviously saw a massive forced acceleration during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Oh, absolutely. Teachers everywhere were just thrust in front of computer screens.
And the global infrastructure for digital learning matured by like a decade overnight.
Which means private online language tutoring has completely taken off.
Right. The source text gives this amazing example of a female educator.
She had a real burden for the Muslim world, right?
Yeah, she did. But relocating to the Middle East just wasn't feasible for her.
So what did she do?
Well, she started tutoring Saudi women one-on-one in English.
Oh, wow. Just via online video calls.
Yeah, right through her webcam. She charged a modest standard hourly fee.
Which is smart, because that establishes a respectful professional dynamic.
It does. But through those consistent hours of weekly conversation, she built genuine, trusting friendships.
And that digital connection led directly to spiritual conversations.
In a nation that is historically completely closed to physical missionary access.
That blows my mind. She is actively crossing international borders and bypassing strict national security protocols.
And entering restricted households right through a webcam in her living room.
You don't even need to renew a passport for that kind of global outreach.
That is very true. But for those who do want to go physically, the fourth major trend is expatriate education.
There has been an unbelievable boom in international schools over the last 20 years.
Driven by rapid globalization and multinational corporate expansion, the number of English-language international schools worldwide grew from about 1,000 to over 8,000.
They now house roughly 4.5 million students.
Cities like Dubai, Beijing, Tokyo, and Riyadh have dozens of these sprawling, well-funded campuses.
These multinational corporations need places to send the children of their executives, so they demand high-tier Western education.
Additionally, wealthy local citizens in these host countries often want their children to attend these schools to prepare them for Western universities.
And these institutions are constantly looking for qualified, state-certified Western educators to staff their classrooms.
All right, hearing all of this, a zealous believer listening to this deep dive might be ready to pack their bags immediately.
It sounds like a guaranteed, foolproof success. You get a great salary, you live in a fascinating global city, and you get to do mission work.
But we need to pump the brakes heavily right here.
Yeah, stepping into this arena brings severe practical challenges that can completely derail the mission if they are not anticipated.
The friction is real. This is where you have to count the cost.
Yes, raw enthusiasm must be matched with clear-eyed, sober preparation.
The sheer logistics of living overseas will test anyone.
The first massive challenge is maintaining mission clarity.
When you are working a demanding full-time secular job overseas, grading papers, dealing with administration, and managing parent expectations, it is remarkably easy to completely lose sight of why you moved across the world in the first place.
The primary goal must always remain God's glory and the building up of the local church.
This is why it is insisted that even fully self-funded educators should be officially sent out by an established home church.
They need that structural accountability and the confirmation of their calling by a body of elders.
Once they arrive on the field, they must prioritize partnering with a healthy local church or working alongside others to plant one if none exists.
If a Christian just moves to Tokyo, teaches excellent English for 5 years, but never connects their students to the body of Christ, they're entirely missing the biblical objective.
The second challenge is language learning.
And I have to throw another friction point at you here, because this seems to directly contradict the entire premise we just established.
Oh, how so?
Well, if English is the undisputed language of global trade, and the local citizens are literally paying us their hard-earned money to speak English to them, why on earth should a Western teacher expend years agonizing over learning the local indigenous dialect?
That is a very valid question.
Why subject ourselves to that grueling, frustrating effort when we already possess the language they want?
It is a profound paradox. Wait, it is a very intense paradox, but it is an absolutely essential one for the Christian.
Explain that for us.
While English transfers data and economic opportunity, the heart language transfers love and dignity.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
When you rely solely on English, you maintain a position of cultural power, convenience, and dominance.
You are forcing the local people to always come to you on your terms.
But when you endure the grueling, humiliating effort to learn the local dialect, you communicate a deep, undeniable respect for the people.
You are telling them your culture possesses something of inherent value that I want to learn.
Furthermore, learning the local tongue forces the highly educated Western teacher into the humbling posture of an infant.
It strips away all their perceived academic superiority.
You transition from being the expert with a master's degree to being the person stumbling over basic verb tenses, desperately needing a local teenager's help just to buy vegetables at the market.
That mechanism of forced humiliation perfectly bridges into the third challenge, which is humility and listening.
There is a massive danger of adopting the sage on the stage mentality.
In many Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, teachers are given immense, almost unquestioned reverence.
If you combine that local cultural reverence with a Western superiority complex, it is an absolute recipe for disaster.
The teacher becomes an unteachable dictator.
I love the framework provided by Donald N. Larson in the sources.
He was an anthropology and linguistics professor, right?
Yeah, and he outlined 3 progressing roles every cross-cultural worker must adopt: the learner, the trader, and the storyteller.
He suggested spending months, if not years, purely functioning as a learner, where your only job is to absorb the language and observe the culture.
Larson's framework is brilliant because it actively fights human pride.
It forces the educator to delay their natural urge to impart knowledge until they have actually earned the relational capital to do so.
You start purely as a learner, completely dependent on the host culture to survive your daily life.
Then, as you gain competence, you slowly transition into a trader.
You begin exchanging cultural insights, sharing parts of your background while still receiving theirs, building reciprocal, balanced relationships.
Only after successfully navigating those first 2 stages do you earn the platform to be a storyteller.
This is when you can finally share the gospel in a way that truly resonates with local context, because you actually understand their fears, their idioms, and their worldview.
Westerners, who are trained to be highly individualistic problem solvers, need to listen far more than they speak when they arrive in a new culture.
And if they don't listen, if they come in loudly and aggressively, they run headfirst into the 4th challenge, which is outsider suspicion.
When you show up in a restricted access nation, the local population does not automatically assume you are there out of the goodness of your heart.
Look at the experience of a man named Thomas Hale III.
He worked in the former Soviet Union for 19 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He attended a local underground church there for over a year, worshiping quietly right alongside the congregation week after week.
Finally, after a year of observation, they asked him to stand up and share his testimony.
After he finished, the local woman introducing him casually mentioned to the entire congregation that for the first several months he attended, she was absolutely certain he was a Western spy.
Wow. She just logically assumed his educational work was a front for CIA espionage.
Thomas Hale offers a very sharp warning regarding this dynamic of suspicion.
He warns against what he calls the civilizing mission of colonialism.
This is the deeply flawed, highly arrogant notion that Westerners are duty-bound to elevate other cultures to an advanced level of civilization.
We have to violently separate our cultural biases from biblical truth.
The goal of a Christian educator is not to make an Asian or African student act, dress, or think like a middle-class American.
The goal is to see them conform to the image of Christ within their own cultural context.
We must look again to Paul's model in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says he became all things to all men, that by all means he might save some.
Paul willingly discarded his own cultural preferences, his ethnic pride, and his dietary habits to remove any unnecessary sociological stumbling blocks to the gospel.
Modern educators must do the exact same thing.
They must strip away their Western political and cultural baggage so the local people only stumble over the cross of Christ, not the teacher's arrogance.
Let's shift the scale of this conversation a bit.
Sure, where are we heading?
Well, we have been looking closely at the posture of the individual educator, the single teacher in a classroom or on a webcam.
Right.
But what happens when we scale that blueprint? Like, what happens when believers institutionalize this effort?
Oh, you mean moving beyond individual tutoring?
Yeah, pooling resources to start fully accredited schools or universities in non-Christian contexts. What happens when a Christian worldview actually owns the building?
Well, when we move to the institutional level, we operate under a governing principle found in the book of Jeremiah.
Chapter 29, verse 7.
Spot on. This is where God commands the Jewish exiles living in Babylon to actively seek the peace and well-being of the pagan city where he has sent them.
So establishing a Christian-led university in a foreign restricted nation is a monumental structural way to seek the well-being of that society.
There are four major tangible benefits to this institutional approach. First, it allows a body of believers to actively love their neighbors by putting the students' learning and holistic development first, rather than just treating them as a revenue stream.
Second, it authenticates the gospel message through the visible corporate witness of transformed lives and stable families among the faculty.
Third, it provides a massive, accredited platform to teach academic truth from a cohesive biblical worldview, actively instilling core virtues like hard work, academic integrity, and honesty.
And fourth, it actively strengthens local churches by providing a geographic hub for discipleship and a reliable pipeline for producing mature, educated believers who can lead those churches.
The contrast between these Christian institutions and the local state-run schools in many developing nations is absolutely staggering.
In many non-Christian majority contexts, state-run universities suffer terribly from chronic underfunding and systemic top-to-bottom corruption.
Professors routinely demand cash bribes from students just to grant passing grades.
The entire educational system is compromised by extortion.
But when a group of Christian professors steps into that environment and offers honest, high-quality, rigorous education and absolutely refuses to demand unrighteous compensation, it sends shockwaves through the entire community.
It is an anomaly that demands an explanation.
This is where our Reformed theology provides a very clear, analytical lens for understanding the sociological situation.
The Reformed view of total depravity perfectly explains the rampant bribery and corruption found in those secular institutions.
Human nature, left entirely to its own devices, will inherently seek selfish gain and exploit any available system of power.
It is entirely predictable.
But when a Christian university operates in that exact same corrupt environment and absolutely refuses to participate in bribery, not just because it violates a Western corporate rulebook, but out of a trembling reverence for a holy God, it creates a stark, undeniable contrast.
The local culture watches this happen. They see an entire institution operating on an entirely different moral axis.
That corporate integrity validates the reality of the gospel message more loudly and clearly than any theology lecture ever could.
I want to use an analogy to capture the mechanics of what one of these institutions actually does for a society.
I love analogies. Let's hear it.
Setting up a Christian university in a corrupt or restricted nation operates a lot like installing a massive water filtration system in a town with a heavily polluted water supply.
Oh, that makes a lot of visual sense.
The institution takes in the raw, culturally influenced students. Students who are accustomed to cheating, bribery, and selfishness.
And it passes them through the rigorous filter of biblical integrity, honest grading, and Christian mentorship.
Over the course of 4 years, it outputs clean, reliable, honest graduates who then flow out to become the business leaders, politicians, and church elders of that society.
It purifies the leadership pipeline. But maintaining that filtration system requires fighting a harsh, incredibly hostile environment.
That hostile environment is very real, and the institutional challenges these universities face are severe.
First, there are intense, often antagonistic government regulations.
In many nations, teaching exclusive biblical Christianity is actively labeled as hate speech or cultural subversion by the state, putting the school's charter at constant risk.
Second, there is fierce market pushback.
When you introduce a high-quality, high-integrity educational model, the corrupt, self-protective establishment feels highly threatened.
They will push back aggressively to protect their own extortion rackets.
Third, there is the relentless logistical challenge of maintaining faithful faculty.
You cannot run a Christian university with secular, unbelieving staff.
You need highly qualified academics with PhDs who are also faithful, mature, Orthodox church members willing to live overseas.
Finding those individuals is incredibly difficult.
And finally, There is the ever-present, creeping danger of mission drift.
Mission drift is terrifying because the history of higher education is littered with examples of it.
Just look at the Ivy League in the United States. Institutions like Harvard, Yale, and Princeton were founded specifically to train Orthodox Christian ministers.
Today, they are completely secularized and often actively hostile to the faith that founded them.
Without vigorous, unyielding oversight from a dedicated board of directors, an institution will inevitably lose its founding theological vision within a generation or two.
You have to fight constantly, tooth and nail, to keep sound theology central to the academic mission.
To prove that these principles, maintaining absolute theological fidelity while effectively engaging a secular campus, are not just theoretical ideas on a whiteboard, we can look at a brilliant boots-on-the-ground case study.
It takes us to Lilongwe, Malawi, specifically to a high-density, bustling district called Area 25.
This case study perfectly encapsulates the mechanics of what it looks like when sound doctrine is put into action in an educational setting.
Yes, the story of Reformation Bible Church in Area 25.
This local church decided to start a campus outreach to the surrounding colleges, but they did not do it the way most modern Western ministries operate.
They didn't rent out a stadium or bring in a rock band.
They simply set up basic wooden book tables on the local college campuses.
And they stocked those tables primarily with dense, centuries-old Puritan writings.
We really have to highlight the sharp contrast here.
The usual campus ministries operating in Malawi at the time relied heavily on flashy showmanship, emotional excitement, and completely student-led movements that were deliberately disconnected from the oversight and authority of a local church.
The result of those emotionally driven, untethered movements was often an environment dominated by spiritual immaturity and moral failure among the students.
Reformation Bible Church looked at that landscape and took the exact opposite approach.
They established 4 non-negotiable tenets for their campus work.
Getting the gospel right through clear biblical evangelism.
Getting the Bible right through rigorous, systematic study.
Getting the church right through formal, accountable membership.
And getting missions right in their daily life and practice.
And the practical result of that approach speaks for itself.
The work didn't just generate artificially inflated attendance numbers or temporary emotional highs that faded by Monday morning.
It produced highly mature, rooted believers.
These college students grew in the faith, graduated, stayed in the community, and eventually became the mature elders and deacons of the local church.
They practically fulfill the mandate of 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 2, where Paul tells Timothy to entrust the teachings to faithful men who will be able to teach others also.
They built a sustainable, multi-generational leadership pipeline without any gimmicks.
What is truly fascinating to analyze is the psychology of why these young Malawian students were so magnetically drawn to the Puritans.
These were old, unadorned paperback books written by men in the 1600s.
But those books clearly, unflinchingly explained God's absolute holiness, man's radical total depravity, and Christ's perfect substitutionary redemption.
The students saw the brokenness and corruption in their own society, and they saw the sin in their own hearts.
The Puritans didn't offer superficial band-aids. They offered a diagnosis that matched the severity of the disease.
This completely validates the Reformed confessional belief that the unvarnished truth of Scripture has an inherent divine efficacy.
The truth is far more compelling to the human soul than any watered-down imported entertainment.
There is a brilliant, almost humorous irony here.
Oh, definitely. If you hired a modern marketing firm to design a campus ministry, the experts would tell you that college students in their early 20s only want pizza parties, laser tags, smoke machines, and lighthearted motivational pep talks.
Yet these young adults in Malawi bypassed all the flashy, loud, well-funded movements.
They eagerly devoured heavy, uncompromising theology because it actually offered real substantive answers to the human condition.
It didn't treat them like fragile consumers. It treated them like sinners in desperate need of a massive savior.
That Malawian case study brings our entire discussion full circle.
It summarizes the core reality that the massive global education sector is not just a secular marketplace meant solely for career advancement and wealth accumulation.
It's a highly fertile, structurally open field for the Great Commission.
Whether you are a young professional teaching English online to a single student across the globe, a seasoned administrator shaping academic policy at a massive international school in Dubai, or a local church member faithfully sharing paperback books at a wooden table in Lilongwe,
The core goal remains the same, right? The glory of God and the building up of his church.
The logistical opportunities are vast, the global demand is incredibly real, and the vocational tools required are very likely already in our hands.
I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder as we close this deep dive.
Think about your own life trajectory.
You have likely spent years, maybe even decades, accumulating university degrees, professional certifications, and highly specialized industry knowledge.
You have stayed up late taking the exams, writing the research papers, and climbing the corporate ladder.
But what if the primary reason God allowed you to acquire that specific secular knowledge wasn't just to secure a comfortable suburban mortgage or to build a robust retirement portfolio?
What if that specific university degree hanging on your wall is actually your Providence-ordained ticket into a closed country?
What if it is the exact credential required to place you in a classroom where a future brother or sister in Christ is currently sitting, waiting for a teacher to arrive and finally tell them the truth? Thank you for joining us on Reformed Thinking.